In the shadows of time, buried beneath centuries of earth and stone, lie objects that bridge the mortal and the divine. These are not merely artifacts, they are vessels of faith, power, and mystery. Each one tells a story that transcends its physical form, connecting us to the beliefs, fears, and hopes of those who came before us. Today, we embark on a journey through recent archaeological discoveries that have unearthed medieval artifacts of profound mystical significance. From papal bulls that once commanded the faithful across Europe to reliquaries that housed the sacred remains of saints, these objects reveal the complex spiritual landscape of the Middle Ages. What makes these discoveries extraordinary is not just their age, but their power to transport us into a world where the boundary between the earthly and the heavenly was gossamer thin, where objects held the very essence of divine intervention. Our first story takes us to the cellars of history, quite literally. In 2024, near Kyburg Castle in northern Switzerland, archaeologists made a remarkable discovery in the basement of a medieval building that had burned in the mid-14th century. What they found was a perfectly preserved right-hand gauntlet, not just any piece of armor, but a masterwork of medieval metallurgy that challenges everything we thought we knew about knights and their equipment. Art historian Matthias Gall explains that this discovery shatters the myth of cumbersome medieval armor. This gauntlet was surprisingly light and flexible, crafted with an expertise that speaks to the sacred relationship between a knight and his protective gear. But what elevates this gauntlet from mere military equipment to mystical artifact is its context and craftsmanship. In medieval times, a knight's armor wasn't simply protection, it was a spiritual shell, blessed by priests and often inscribed with prayers or religious symbols. The gauntlet represented the knight's oath-bound hand, the very instrument through which he would serve God and Lord. Archaeologist Lorena Burkhardt notes that the location of this find is particularly intriguing. There's speculation that a smithy existed in the town outside the castle, a place where master craftsmen would have worked not just with metal, but with the very essence of chivalric purpose. Each blow of the hammer wasn't merely shaping steel, it was forging a sacred contract between warrior and divine protection. The mystery deepens when we consider that this gauntlet survived the fire that destroyed the building around it. Was this preservation accidental, or does it hint at something more profound? Perhaps the protective power attributed to sanctified armor. In 2024, a metal detectorist named Jacek Ukowski was searching for World War II relics in Poland when his detector led him to something far more ancient and mystically significant, a fragment of a medieval papal bull. A papal bull, named for the bubble-shaped lead seal attached to it, was more than a document. It was a direct conduit of papal authority, a physical manifestation of divine will on earth. These artifacts possessed what medieval people believed to be inherent spiritual power. The fragment Ukowski discovered bore Roman numerals and partial inscriptions dating it between 1303 and 1352. But this wasn't just any papal bull. Recent analysis suggests it may have been connected to the tumultuous period when the papacy moved to Avignon, a time when papal authority was being questioned and reinforced through powerful mystical symbols. At Washington State University, another extraordinary papal bull was rediscovered, one issued by Pope Innocent III nearly 800 years ago. This particular bull protected a house for lepers in Caen, France. To understand its mystical significance, we must recognize that in medieval thinking, papal documents weren't merely legal instruments, they were talismans of protection. The lead seal itself was considered sacred. The process of creating it involved molten lead being pressed between brass matrices, one showing Saints Peter and Paul, the other bearing the Pope's name. This wasn't merely bureaucracy, it was ritual magic, transforming base metal into an object imbued with the keys of heaven. Consider the extraordinary case of Pope Paul II, who reigned from 1464 to 1471. In a moment of unprecedented audacity, he completely changed the traditional papal bull design that had remained unchanged for over 1,000 years. Instead of just the faces of Saints Peter and Paul, he depicted their full bodies and placed his own image on the reverse. This wasn't vanity. It was a profound statement about the mystical connection between earthly and heavenly authority. What makes these discoveries even more remarkable is their survival. Medieval papal bulls were deliberately destroyed when they became outdated or when political situations changed. The fact that these particular bulls survived suggests they may have been hidden for a reason, perhaps protected by those who recognized their inherent mystical power. Perhaps no medieval artifacts blur the line between art and mysticism more dramatically than reliquaries, elaborate containers designed to house the physical remains of saints and martyrs. In 2024, archaeological discoveries across Europe have revealed new insights into these extraordinary objects. A reliquary wasn't simply a beautiful box, it was a spiritual powerhouse believed to emanate healing energy, protection, and miracles. Medieval people understood that the precious materials used in their construction, gold, silver, ivory, and gems, weren't mere decoration, but were necessary to properly honor the sacred power within. Recent discoveries in Italy and France have uncovered reliquaries that demonstrate the sophisticated understanding medieval craftsmen had of spiritual symbolism. These weren't random artistic choices. Every detail was deliberate and meaningful. Consider the arm-shaped reliquaries that have been found. These weren't created to be realistic representations. They were mystical vessels that channeled the specific healing power of the saint's arm. If you suffered from an injury to your hand or arm, you would seek out an arm-shaped reliquary. The form itself was believed to focus and direct the saint's miraculous energy. Byzantine artifacts discovered in recent excavations reveal even more complex mystical beliefs. Votive eye tokens, shaped like eyes, were believed to cure blindness and other vision problems. The very shape of the artifact was thought to resonate with the afflicted body part, creating a sympathetic connection between the earthly sufferer and the heavenly healer. What's particularly fascinating about recent discoveries is evidence of the holy dust phenomenon. Gary Viken's research into Byzantine medical magic reveals that dust collected from saints' tomb sites was incorporated into amulets and reliquaries. This wasn't superstition. It was a sophisticated understanding of what we might today call sympathetic magic, where objects maintained mystical connections to their sources. The power of these objects wasn't theoretical to medieval people. It was viscerally real. Chronicles describe reliquaries curing everything from demonic possession to baldness, from battle wounds to barrenness. The mystical energy was believed to be so potent that even being in proximity to a reliquary could provide protection and healing. In 2024, LiDAR technology revealed two lost medieval cities along the Silk Road in eastern Uzbekistan, Tugunbulak and Tashbulak. These discoveries have unveiled a treasure trove of artifacts that demonstrate how mystical objects traveled between East and West during the medieval period. Among the artifacts discovered are objects that show the fascinating fusion of Eastern mysticism with European medieval spiritual practices. Islamic talismans inscribed with Quranic verses, Buddhist prayer wheels, and Christian reliquaries were found in the same archaeological contexts, suggesting a vibrant exchange of mystical traditions. What makes these discoveries particularly significant is evidence of how mystical artifacts were deliberately collected and traded. These weren't merely curiosities, they were recognized as sources of spiritual power that transcended religious boundaries. Medieval merchants and travelers understood that sacred objects from different traditions could provide complementary forms of protection and blessing. A recently discovered medieval workshop in one of these cities contained tools for creating mystical jewelry and amulets. The craftsmanship shows techniques that originated in Persia, were refined in Central Asia, and eventually influenced European religious metalwork. This workshop wasn't just producing decorative items, it was a factory of mystical protection, creating objects that would accompany travelers on dangerous journeys. The artifacts from these Silk Road cities reveal something profound about medieval mysticism. It was genuinely international. A Christian knight might carry an Islamic protective amulet alongside his saint's relic, understanding that divine power could manifest through different traditions and cultures. In 2024, routine restoration work in Venice's Piazza San Marco led to an extraordinary discovery: the ruins of the medieval church of San Gimignano and stone-lined tombs dating to the 7th or 8th century. This discovery is mystically significant because it reveals the sacred geography of medieval Venice. These aren't random burial sites. They represent the deliberate consecration of ground that would later become one of Christianity's most important squares. The stone-lined tombs discovered beneath the piazza show evidence of ritual burial practices that blur the line between Christian and earlier pagan traditions. The careful orientation of the graves, the placement of stones, and the artifacts buried with the deceased suggest a complex understanding of death as a mystical transition. What's particularly intriguing is that these burials were made in ground that was regularly flooded by the Adriatic. This wasn't practical, it was mystical. The medieval Venetians appear to have believed that burial in ground touched by the sea provided special spiritual significance, perhaps connecting the deceased to both earthly and celestial waters. The living power of mystical artifacts. As we conclude our journey through these remarkable recent discoveries, we're left with a profound realization. These mystical artifacts weren't simply relics of a superstitious past. They represent a sophisticated understanding of the relationship between the physical and spiritual worlds. Each object we've explored, the Swiss Knight's gauntlet, the papal bulls, the reliquaries, the Silk Road talismans, the Venetian burial grounds, tells us that medieval people lived in a world where objects possessed inherent spiritual power. They understood something that modern skepticism has perhaps lost, that certain items can serve as genuine bridges between the seen and unseen worlds. These artifacts continue to emerge from the earth, carrying their stories and their mysteries into our modern world. They remind us that the line between the mystical and the material has always been thinner than we might believe, and that objects of faith continue to hold power over those who approach them with understanding and respect. The stories they hold are not finished. They continue to unfold with each new discovery, each careful excavation, each moment when ancient mystery meets modern wonder.